Well, good evening, everyone. Sorry, I forgot to take that thumbnail off. But anyway, welcome to COS Indiana Live. I'm Dale Parrish. I'm the your host this evening, and I want to welcome also my co-host this evening, Mr. Ken Toshuba. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Dale. How are you?
Oh, pretty good, pretty good. Trying to make a little change there on our introduction, and
I know, yeah.
I even practiced that, Ken, and I still kind of messed it up.
Oh, well.
Anyway, uh, Ken is our state communications coordinator, and so Ken will be monitoring our viewer comments and questions tonight. So if you are viewing via Facebook or YouTube, feel free to enter a comment or a question in the chat section, and we'll be monitoring those. Ken will be looking at those, and we'll be bringing any of those to our attention that are applicable. So, Ken, we always like to check and see the numbers. This is broadcast number 244, and you've been on board for 108. So, we're closing in on that 250 mark. So,
Holding it along.
Yep, hold on. So, closing in on it. Anyway, Ken, how about telling us briefly about the QR code that's up in the corner there?
Sure enough, Dale, that little QR code is for people to take their smartphone out and snap a picture of that so that you can subscribe to COS Indiana Live. Get on that real quick. It'll ask for your name and an email address, and you'll be all subscribed. Lots of good benefits out there, and we're looking forward to having more subscribers join us. So
cool. And we're putting together more and more things, special things for subscribers, right? So,
yep, some good information and educational materials.
Good deal. All right, thanks, Ken. Well, something that we've made it a practice of, and that I'm going to give it a full screen here, and that's to bring up the debt clock. And folks, if you don't look at this from time to time, you need to. usdebtclock.org. And this gives you so much information, much more information than we have time to go into right now. But I want to look at this. I want you to look at this on every broadcast, because dealing with the national debt, addressing the national debt, is one of the main pillars of the Convention of States resolution calling for a Convention of States for the purpose of proposing amendments to the Constitution. And one of those pillars is to address the national debt. And Ken, I want to, you see up here in the upper left-hand corner, we're approaching $35 trillion as a national debt. And Ken, what I like to do is I like to pretend like this is my household, or this is your household, okay?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And if you just knock off the last 9 numbers, okay? You knock off the last 9 numbers. So your household right now, you're in debt. You have a debt of $34,753. All right?
Okay.
And if you look over here to the right, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Where it says national revenue?
Yeah.
If you knock off the last 9 numbers, you've earned $4,843 this year.
Oh, wow. That's
you go back over here to total spending.
Right.
Knock off the last 9 numbers, you spent $6,669.
Uh-oh. I'm in trouble with my wife, actually.
You're in the hole already this year, this fiscal year, of $1,826. You're already in the hole. So you know where, doesn't that tell you something? I mean, that's just for this year.
Yeah.
The $1,826.
The trouble with all that is that first number you're talking about starts with a tree, a T, not
yes. These are actually in trillion. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
But I think it's fun, or it's interesting. It makes it a little more meaningful, I should say, not fun at all.
It brings it down to earth so people can understand a little better.
Yeah, you got a household in debt, $35,000, and you're already on the way to adding another almost $2,000 to that number.
Yeah.
So anyway, this is something this is a priority in Convention of States, and I think it should be a priority in this country. And I want us to be looking at this all the time and make sure that we're aware of it. So that's what I wanted to do on the debt clock.
It's a good
so,
comparison.
Kim, let's get started this evening. We got a soapbox video, and it happens to be me. Okay. I'm on the soapbox this evening, and I want to talk a little bit about immigration and a very, very good documentary that I recently saw. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that on. Greetings, everyone. Dale Parrish, host, COS Indiana Live. As you know, we've been on COS Indiana Live. We've been trying to address major issues going on in our country at this time and how Convention of States relates to those issues. Well, one of the issues that we've been pursuing is immigration. And I'm sure if you're like me, I've been focusing very much on the cartels and the Mexican government, our border patrol, what's been going on at our southern border, that those are the problems. Those are what are creating this problem that we have with regard to immigration. Well, what I have found out is that it's a bigger issue than that. And it's through weapons of mass migration. And I want to bring to your attention a documentary that I just viewed. It's through Epic TV. So you need to go to epictv.com to access this. And it's called Weapons of Mass Migration. This documentary has just opened my eyes to this problem as being much, much greater than just what's happening right at our southern border. And I want to address this a little bit with you. This issue, this problem, in my opinion, or at least according to the documentary, stems from the United Nations, and specifically with a compact that we are involved in now called the Global Compact for Migration. Now, we are one of over 100 countries involved in this compact. This is something that Obama got us into, and then Trump pulled us out of the compact, and now Biden has put us back in. So this is the overriding issue with regard to our immigration problem, and it's this global compact for migration through the United Nations. Not only is it the compact, but there's over 200 NGOs involved in this compact and helping bring these people to our country. Well, what is the goal? Well, you will find out in the documentary that the goal appears to be global control. And in order to accomplish global control, the United States has to be diminished. And in order to diminish the United States, then we have to bring in untold numbers of immigrants. So more will be discussed on this. We will follow this issue even more on COS Indiana Live. So I hope you'll be staying with us on this, because the problem is a much, much larger problem, you might know. So stay with us. Thank you very much. All right. Well, just wanted to share some thoughts on that particular topic, and I'm going to do more of that because there are some other topics, some other issues that I think are very, very important. going on in our country. So that was I wanted to get on the soapbox and talk about that a bit.
Good
All
one.
right, Ken.
Yep.
Let's bring on our first guest this evening, and we're going to be talking about ham radios. So let's bring on Mr. Dale Tipton, our current state director. Hello, Dale.
Greetings, gentlemen.
Hey, Dale's got his COS shirt on this evening. He's all ready to go. I'll tell you.
Looking dapper.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where's yours, I might ask?
you know, it's been a while since I bought a COS shirt. I probably ought to do that.
He's got it underneath that white shirt. Don't let him fool you.
Yeah.
You know, they keep improving that COS store, so there's always something new that's popping up.
Yeah, it sure is. Sure is. Well, Dale, we want to talk about a topic called the COS Amateur Ham Radio Coalition. Am I right?
You are correct.
And tell us, if you would, let's start from the beginning here. How did this COS Amateur Ham Radio Coalition concept begin?
Well, like a lot of other things, you hear about businesses that are started over a drawing on a napkin. Um, it was almost like that. There weren't any notes taken on the napkin, but back in October of last year, we had our chief Mark Meckler come out and join us at the Living Stones Church in Crown Point for a presentation there, which was excellent.
Yeah.
And he got here early enough. He had some time to spare, and he ended up he had an appointment that canceled on him, and so I came over and met with him at this local restaurant, and we had a good time to just sit together, just he and I, and talk. And as you know, Mark is full of ideas, and he's always thinking about things. And during the course of the conversation, he made reference to the COS family, as he described it. Anybody who's a volunteer supporter, that showed appreciation for the Article 5 movement, what we're trying to do. He has great, feelings for those people, especially the people like you guys that hold positions and, are trying to move the work forward. And we kind of took a little bit of a dark turn in the conversation, thinking about the outlook for the country, the inflation and some of the negative things that have happened with, storms and disasters, government interference and stuff. And we started talking briefly about, well, how would people communicate? I know me personally, I used to have a landline phone. I gave it up. And I've got that number on a cell phone now because the landline was, deemed, didn't really need it anymore. And I think that's probably true with most people. But if things happen and the world gets kind of stirred up from whether it's a storm or some other kind of terrorist act or almost anything, cell phone towers in the region where it all happens, they get overloaded rather quickly. And pretty soon the communication that we've all depended on, kind of goes down. And so we were talking.
That is a really valid point. We enjoy the internet, and we utilize the internet, and we utilize all the technology and everything, but it's vulnerable, isn't it?
It is vulnerable, as you have personally seen in your neck of the woods, right?
Yes.
I mean, we've all been hit with those outages from time to time, and you can imagine an outage of a few hours is disruptive. So what would an outage over several days or weeks be like?
One of the conditions that I hate the most is when we have a storm or something come through and our power goes out. I've got some friends in the Houston area right now and their power just came back on. Been out of power for some days. And can you imagine if your power was out and you couldn't communicate with anyone? That would really be miserable. That would really be.
Well, and it was in the midst of this discussion that the idea of ham radio came up because almost all of us remember some guy in the neighborhood, generally an older guy, who had a big tower sitting out in his yard someplace or on his property, and maybe he gave ham radio lessons to the local Boy Scouts or something like that, but you knew of the guy and that he was making contact with people around the world,
Right.
via a ham radio.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I started talking about those things after the meeting with some folks, and the idea kind of spawned of forming a coalition, um, so that COS people could maintain some kind of communication in the event of an emergency or any other situation which would cause our normal forms of communication to go down.
Okay. All right. All right.
So that's kind of how it all started, and that was back in. Well, the initial conversations took place in October, and it really started to gel probably around January of this year.
Yeah, this hasn't been in the process for a very long period of time. That's for sure.
No, no, that's true.
But
But it's interesting.
okay.
There's a lot of different aspects to it, as I'm finding out, and it requires licensing through the FCC. If you talked on the old CB radios, you were limited to normally like 40 channels, and there was no training, there was no anything. You just picked up the microphone and started talking. But since these are a much wider reaching area, and plus you run into bandwidths that are used by like commercial television stations and things like that, so it's very tightly controlled.
Now, ham operators have been in existence prior to the CB radio fad, right?
Well, yeah, it goes back years and years and years.
Goes way, way back, way back.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean the initial radios had, if you remember, probably an old television that you had that had picture tubes and all these other tubes for the different functions. That was the same thing with the initial ham radios.
All
They
right.
were rather large boxes, probably about the size of maybe a printer that you would have around the house now, that was full of all kinds of circuits and tubes and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
Of course, connecting to the generally somewhat of a monstrous antenna, to get your signal out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know you had some help in getting this up and going, and somebody that's still playing a role.
Yeah,
In this, but yeah.
Bud is one of the chief SIAs for the national team, and so he basically has the power to just do stuff. If he's got the blessing of Mr. Meckler, he can just start pushing buttons and making things happen. So he developed the web page that we're now using. He formed the backbone of the coalition so that it could be selected by COS members. Um, he put all of the content into the website. He built us our own Slack workspace so that we could communicate that way. All of those technical things have been Bud's.
Yeah. Now, we just had Bud on our program as a guest here just recently, and I knew he was involved in this coalition, but I didn't know to what extent. So he's
Yeah.
been
Yeah, interestingly enough, he worked with ship radars and that kind of stuff back in his military days.
he's
And he,
retired military. That's right.
yeah, and he has a full, not just a ham license, but he actually has an FCC communications license that allows him to do work on radars and all that kind of stuff. So
Wow.
he
Wow.
is he has been deep into it. Very very sharp guy in the world of electronics and radio wave communication.
Oh, cool. Cool. Well, you said he helped develop a website, right?
A web page, yeah. I
A
guess you
web
could call
page.
it website, web page. You bet. Just a
And
place to get us some information out there.
we're going to pull that up here right now. But for anyone that's interested, it's conventionofstates.com/ham-radio. So let's pull this up, and you kind of walk us through this, Dale. I'm going to give it a full screen here, so we're still here. We didn't go away. All
Yeah,
right.
so basically it starts out, we've got some nice graphics that the national graphics team put together for us. It gives you an initial kind of an explanation of what ham radio actually is, and then just kind of go ahead and arrow down there a little bit. Um,
Okay.
there's a mission statement that basically that was Gunny's too. I put a couple ideas in there, and he kind of put that together. And then we've got a message from our president, Mark Meckler, because he was one that had always been interested in ham radio, but was kind of put off by the seeming complexity of it and the licensing and the the electronic terms, engineering terms, and stuff that he was just unfamiliar with and thought it might be just more than he wanted to tackle.
Let's go back a little bit to this mission statement, Dale. To engage COS volunteers reaching out to American patriots and build an engaged army of self-governing grassroots activists. Now that's part of the Convention of States mission statement right there.
Yep.
And using ham radio communications.
So the thing really with that is, I mean, we're interested in the communication angle, but there's also 750,000 licensed ham operators in the United States.
Wow.
And that number seems to be growing. And so it seemed like a natural fit, to pair with, whenever you talk about like-minded organization, it's like Moms for Liberty and the things that they believe in. Basically, if you talk to ham operators around the country, they're basically politically aligned with most people that you meet in Convention of States. And so, obviously, besides gaining expertise from people that have been in this hobby for decades, we also have the opportunity, during social times and other interactions where, we can talk about the Article 5 movement and what that means, and see if it piques the interest out there of some of these folks.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, if you keep going down here.
The key thing there is that green button, which will take you to a page that shows you how to join. Mm-hmm. And basically the only qualifications for joining the coalition is you have to have a account at conventionofstates.com. And so once you have that account, you will have access to a personal profile, and it's within that profile that you can select the Amateur Ham Radio Coalition, and then you can get involved.
All right. Well, this was very interesting, I thought. The different types of ham radios. Now, I guess you can, am I right? You can choose to what extent you want to be involved in this, right?
You can, and it's like, it goes from fairly inexpensive. You can buy, especially the Chinese made handheld radios, for $30 a piece. Or you can spend several $1,000s on some top of the line, very sophisticated, radios that are base stations.
Very interesting.
Yeah, all different kinds. I mean, basically, you've either got the handhelds that are fairly short range, or you have mobile radios that you can actually mount in your car or truck, or you have a base station that pretty much stays at any one place, in your house, on your desk, or some people have separate rooms. They call them ham stations, where they put all their ham gear together, and they put TV or computer monitors up on the wall for graphics and things, and get very deeply into it.
Can you you said your uncle used to do this, and he had his radio in his car?
Well, he had a mobile, but he also had a base station.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah, he had a base station, but he would get out in the mobile now and again and travel out, to see what he could, how far he could reach with his mobile. And
well, what did the mobile look like? Was it something that was it built into the car like a radio, or?
No, it kind of looked like what you would do when you put a CB radio in your car. It looked a little bit like that. And,
okay. All right.
The only difference was he had this big old whip antenna on the back of the bumper, and that thing, that thing extended up in the air. And of course, the higher you got in elevation, the more reach you could get. But so he'd come up now and again, because I lived on a little bit of a hill, to see how far he could, would reach with his mobile.
Yeah. I remember seeing those antennas on the back of cars. Yeah. Very interesting. So this can go from a few bucks to thousands of dollars, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And there's also a huge market for used things.
Oh,
If you're a fixer upper, they have flea markets for all of this stuff, antennas, radios, all of the stuff that goes along with it. They just had a hamvention over in Ohio that is like an extremely large gathering. It was like a 3-day event where they have vendors from all of the major radio supply houses and antenna manufacturers and all that stuff that meet together and tell the people, like going to a giant gun show or car show or anything like that, exhibiting their products.
tell us more about the testing. I noticed here that one of the benefits was some help on testing.
Yeah, we've basically put together a document within the coalition that guides people completely through the testing process. But basically, what it involves is you create an account with the FCC, and then you're given what's called an FRN number, which is basically just your account number with the FCC that allows you to communicate directly with them. It also allows them to bill you for different things. And so whenever um, you get your number, you present that number to your local club or your online testing group or whatever, so that they can tie that specific number to you. And then whenever you pass your test, all that information is sent in and goes into the FCC's database. And whenever you're registered there with like the first class of license as technician, once that becomes registered, then the FCC will send you a nice email that says, "Well, here's the call sign that you now have, and you can use that for just a small sum of $35."
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
Got it.
here's where you can get some information if you're interested, and
Yeah.
you fill this form out, and and it makes contact with the Ham Radio Coalition Director. And who might that be?
That would be me. So all of these emails come directly here. Through the other method, once you set up your account at conventionofstates.com, you select the Ham Radio Coalition, the Amateur Ham Radio Coalition, and it works the same way. That will trigger an email that will come to me to say that have joined the coalition, and then I will reach out and get you entered into the system and get you a Slack account and those kind of things.
All right. All
I
right.
thought just for interest, this is one of the handhelds.
Oh,
And so you can see they're not very big. They're pretty tiny. This one in my area is capable of talking about 30 miles.
kind of looks like a walkie-talkie. You remember walkie-talkies back in the
Well,
day?
yeah. Well, they call these handy talkies too. So
Did they?
yeah, anything that's I mean, you can see the size of my hand, and it
Yeah.
fits like right there. That's pretty small. But
Wow.
these are really good for local communication, civil defense information, picking up things from the police, emergency responders, other people within your community. So that's where a lot of people like to start. And these pick up local repeaters. Like I have a repeater that's about probably 7 or 8 miles from my house. This radio will pick up that repeater, and then that will broadcast the signal, magnify it, and then it'll go out. Like I said, I've talked to people, 30, 35 miles away.
Wow. Okay, cool.
So
All right. Very interesting. Well, Dale, tell us, let's wrap it up here. What are your objectives going forth here?
well, we're in the process. We've got about 85 people in our Slack channel right now. Many of those people are I'd say probably 50% are pretty new. They're either in the process, they've either just got a license, or they're in the steps of acquiring a license. And so we're starting to put together some training for those people. We have monthly meetings where we'll talk about different different aspects of ham radio. There's all kinds of digital communication that you can use. There's a continuous wave communication is what's used to send Morse code, if you're familiar with that. Morse code used to be a requirement to get a ham license. It is not any longer. That scared a lot of people away. But since it is no longer a requirement, it's triggered a resurgence in people who are interested in Morse code. And so there's a fairly big following, and they have special band areas just for that type of signal.
I did Morse code in the Boy Scouts. I remember that very much.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. The last exam that I took, I did it remotely. And one of my examiners was a guy who had been in ham radio for 67 years.
My,
And his first experience was in the Boy Scouts.
yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think that I think that was a requirement for one of the badges, I believe, if I recall right. Uh, but anyway, yeah, I
Yeah,
remember
I'm sure
doing
it was.
that.
But anyway, training, building a communications network. We're working on a plan where at a given time, date and time, we'll get together and get on the air and then just kind of take turns talking and see exactly who can hear who so that we can set up, radio stations in different areas that have the best ability to broadcast and to listen. And then you can either exchange messages locally or regionally or however you want to do it. I mean, the way it works best is if people use these smaller radios, you gather information from your locality, and then you go into like a regional net and then a nationwide net so that the information can be shared back and forth. So
Right.
that's an experimental thing that is going on right now, besides the just helping people learn and get accustomed with it.
Good.
Most communities have ham radio clubs. I have one in my county that I've started going to. It gives you more people to meet. They have field days where they get out, have barbecues and stuff. They set up these radios and you can take turns using them or watch other people use them if you have an interest. Just all kinds of things involved in the hobby.
All right. Sounds good, Dale. So keep us, stay in touch with us on this. Maybe we'll have you back again and see how things are coming along with this. It's very interesting. Very
Yeah,
interesting.
if you or Ken need to get on the air, you know who to call.
All right. All right, Dale. Thank you, bud. Have a good
All right.
evening.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
All right. All right. That was interesting, Ken.
Yeah. It's coming. Like I say, it's always been around, and the interest is growing again. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the next segment that I would like to do is we have a new series starting called Meet the Founders. And one of our regional captains, Larry Hudson, is doing this series. And we're going to present to you this evening episode 1 of this. And the founder that he's presenting tonight is George Mason. And of course, George Mason was basically the author of Article 5 of the Constitution, which COS is based upon. So I'm going to play the recording of the video of with Larry Hudson. It's Larry and I together on episode 1, George Mason. And we'll be doing more of these episodes with Larry as we go forward here. So hope you all enjoy this. Hello, Larry. Good to see you.
It's good to see you, Dale. Pleasure to be with you.
Thanks for joining us tonight. Well, Larry, we want to talk about the new series that you're starting now, the Founders series, and the first founder that you're going to talk about tonight is Mr. George Mason, and I should say Colonel George Mason. And those of us in Convention of States, we know this name very well. However, a lot of people maybe don't know the name very well. Certainly names like Madison, Franklin, Washington, Hamilton, those obviously are names that people generally recognize readily regarding the Constitutional Convention of 1787. But probably very few non-COS individuals know little about George Mason. So I'm glad you picked George Mason, Larry, as your first founder to talk about. So have you found it interesting? Have you learned some things? I know you've been in COS for quite some time. Have you learned some things about him that you didn't know?
Yeah, I mean, I knew what we know, largely around Article 5,
Right.
but I learned so much more. I've been reading all summer on the Revolutionary period, and Mason is a key figure in our Constitution. He spoke in the top 5 of the 55 delegates that were there to the end. He spoke in the top 5 of those 55
Is that
delegates.
right? Really?
Yeah.
Well, let's get started. I've got about 5 questions I want to try and get you to talk about tonight. Tell us about his background. I think you've told me he was wealthy. He was a slave owner, right?
Yes.
A large estate. Tell us about and I know you mentioned something about the little R, not the big R, but the little R. Tell us a bit about his background.
Okay. Be happy to. Well, as you said, he was wealthy. He was a planter, lived in Virginia, a colonel. He was born, I think, in early 1700s, 1725. He was a 4th in the line of George Mason's. He owned slaves, 300 at one time.
Really? 300?
I'm sorry?
300, really?
Yeah. Well,
wow.
he inherited them. He didn't buy any of his slaves, but he inherited them through his father and grandfather.
Okay. All right.
And he was a wealthy planter. He was a Republican, you mentioned, with a small R. We can go into that a little later. A staunch defender of states' rights, really. And he was known as an anti-federalist. But I think he would argue that he really wasn't an anti-federalist. He was, in fact, a true federalist. But it was Washington, Hamilton, Madison, Wilson, Morris, etc., who were really nationalists, not federalists. They were nationalists and or monarchists.
Okay.
Hamilton being a monarchist in particular.
All right. Let's move on. Let's talk a little bit more about his military background. Now, we know he was a colonel. Tell us about his war experience. Was he in the Revolutionary War? Or I know there's some confusion about that. Tell us some more about his military experience.
Okay. Well, he volunteered during the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War, as it's commonly referred to in Europe. And he did receive the rank of colonel, which he carried, I guess, through the rest of his life. And he served as a quartermaster in that war.
Okay.
And after the war, I think he would have been considered. He did not fight, as I will explain later, in the Revolutionary War. He was a legislator by that time, was not a combatant. But after the war, he would have been considered, I think, a loyalist. It wasn't until after his wife died that he really came out and publicly supported colonial independence.
Okay.
He served in the Virginia legislature for most of the Revolutionary War.
All
He did organize a state militia in Virginia, and he was involved in the recruitment of troops for the Continental Army.
Okay. Well, next question. Tell me about the convention, the Constitutional Convention, 1787. How did he participate in that? I think wasn't he kind of in favor of amending the articles at that time, Articles of Confederation? What was his role in the convention?
Well, I think most came with the idea that they would amend the Articles of Confederation. Yeah, I think we need to remember that after the war ended, the country was flat broke and in debt. Inflation was rampant. The states all had their own currencies, no means of taxation through the Articles. And so they were just nigh impossible to amend because it took all 13 states to be unanimous and to agree to any changes. So when they got to the convention, they came prepared, really the folks from Virginia, they came prepared. I want to read a quote here. They came prepared because to devise the amendments to the Articles of Confederation, but it was added, and such further provisions as shall appear to them necessary to render the Constitution of the federal government adequate to the exigencies of the Union. So after the first week or two, it became clear the articles weren't worth amending, and it would be impossible to amend them in the first place. So they struck out to write a constitution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of leads us to this next question: is he wasn't a signer of the Constitution, right? He was against it, and I know the need for a Bill of Rights played a role here. Tell us about why was he not a signer of the Constitution initially?
Well, you're right. He wasn't a signer, and there were a couple of others that didn't sign as well. But in the early days of the convention, I think he basically agreed with James Madison and Washington, and they proposed the Virginia Plan, and he pretty much supported it, with the exception of the representation, how representation in both houses of Congress would be accomplished. And he, I think, agreed with that the federal government should be more powerful than the states, but there was a big division over the representation plan. And when it became apparent in, I don't know, June, I think, he was nominated to be on a committee, and they came up with the Great Compromise, or the Connecticut Compromise, as we call it today, where the House of Representatives was based on population, and the state and the Senate was based on equal representation for each state. Well, he was opposed to that compromise, and I think that's where he took a turn to be against the Constitution. He also proposed a Bill of Rights, which they voted down at that point in time. That was
okay, all right.
So he was a slave owner.
Yeah.
He didn't like the idea that Great Compromise included extending the foreign slave trade until 1808. That really.
He didn't like the foreign slave trade, huh?
Right.
Okay.
He owned slaves. He was pragmatic. He couldn't give up his slaves. He had 5,500 acres under crops, but he believed in manumission, not emancipation. And so this became a sticking point with him. This,
okay.
The lack of a Bill of Rights, both.
All right. Well, let's get to what we all know him about, and that's Article 5 and his role in formulating Article 5 of the convention, and what was the response to his work in that area?
Good question. By the time the convention was reaching an end in mid-September, there was an amendment that had been added to the work that they had done that basically proposed Article 5. But that provision read that there were two processes to follow to change the Constitution. One, the national legislature or the Congress could propose amendments, or two, the Congress could call for a convention of states for this purpose. So both methods then were left in the hands of the Congress. And Mason argued, basically, I think, let me find it here. He argued that an oppressive Congress would never agree to propose amendments necessary to restrain a rogue, tyrannical legislature.
Right.
And so he was very much opposed to that. And a day before the convention actually adjourned, as it turned out, he argued very strenuously on the floor that he wanted to grant the states the power to propose amendments. And it was essential to preserving the balance of power and protecting the rights of the people themselves. So he argued that Article 5, as it was then currently written, would allow Congress to block as well as propose amendments. So he'd objected back in June, as I mentioned earlier, and he was voted down. But now he proposed that we need to have a way of bypassing Congress. So he proposed that the second clause to Article 5 be changed to allow for the purpose of proposing amendments. And this would bypass Congress and place the process entirely in the hands of the people through their elected state representatives.
And that's what we're trying to get done right now.
That's right.
That's what Convention of States is all about. Excellent.
And remarkably, you asked, or you mentioned, Madison's notes of the convention tell us that Mason's motion on the day before the convention was in fact accepted without a single dissenting comment. And the language was changed in order to mandate that Congress call the convention upon the application of 2/3 of the several states. And it's noteworthy, I think, probably here to point out that this process does not call for a constitutional convention. As
Right.
many today want to tell everybody. It's something we hear constantly from those that oppose this process.
Right.
The language actually specifies for calling a convention for the purpose of proposing amendments to the existing Constitution, and it still requires 3/4 of the states to ratify any amendment that is proposed by the convention.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
Larry, thank you very much. I just want to mention before we sign off here, the next founder that Larry is going to research for us is Thomas Jefferson. So Larry will be looking forward to talking to you and getting your report on Thomas Jefferson. Larry, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you very much.
Hey, I appreciate it. Take care.
All right, there we go.
Very interesting, very deep and very thorough.
Yes. Larry does a great job. And I want to assure everyone that going forward, Larry and I are going to do a better job on these. That was kind of that was our first episode on Meet the Founders, and I think you'll find that we will do a little better, little smoother job going forward here. I want to jump now to another series that we've started, and this series is called COS Basics. And John Ackerman, who hosts our roundtables, as well as he also does John's journals. But John Ackerman has started this series for us called COS Basics, and he's done a couple of them already. But this one where he just did, and it's on servant leadership. So, Ken, I'd like to just jump right on in and do that one right now if we can. Okay.
Jump right to it. Yep.
John Ackerman for Convention of States, Indiana. This is the third video in my series on COS Basics. As I said at the outset, an organization's effectiveness is a direct result of its values. And so we are looking at Convention of States core values here in this series of videos. Core value number 1 was to preserve constitutional originalism. Number 2 was to foster responsible self-governance. And now I want to talk to you about number 3, cultivate servant leaders. Now, way back in the Bible, Jesus said that he came to earth not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Now, what is the definition of a servant leader? It's someone who shares power, puts the needs of coworkers ahead of his or her own needs, and helps people develop and perform to the highest level possible. Instead of the people working to serve the leader exists to serve the people. And in order to do that, a servant leader must listen to the people, find out what their needs are, find out what their hopes and dreams and aspirations and goals and objectives are. I'm going to quote a British Prime Minister from the 19th century. His name was Benjamin Disraeli. He was a conservative politician and a writer who was elected 2 times to serve as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and he played a central role in the creation of the modern Conservative Party in the United Kingdom. He helped to define its policies and its broad outreach. Benjamin Disraeli said, "I must follow the people. Am I not their leader?" Let that one sink in. I must follow the people. Am I not their leader? You see, servant leadership inspires employees and volunteers to serve others. and to make a positive difference in their communities. Here in Convention of States, we promote these principles of servant leadership through training and mentorship opportunities. And let me close by saying this, that the highest calling of leadership is to unlock the potential of others. Core value number 3, cultivate servant leaders.
Another fine job by John Ackerman.
John's a busy man.
He is busy. He's got, I think he's, I've kind of lost track. I think he's got about 8 of these recorded so far, hasn't he? Have you seen?
I looked. I think he had sent through from number 8. So yeah, I agree.
Number 8. So, and we're gonna try and play more of these more often. Since we've also got not only the Meet the Founders series, but we've also got the Debt Avalanche series going by Gary Harbaugh. So, Ken, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to get these videos included in our lineup.
Well, and as a subscriber, you get to see them all anyway. So that's one way of seeing them.
That's right. That's right. So we're compiling these into sets. So as a subscriber, you can have access to each of these sets for your viewing pleasure. So, but we're going to try our best to get these out to you during our weekly broadcast. So, Ken, let's start wrapping up here. I want to talk about our broadcast next Monday. That is normally a roundtable, and since next Monday is Memorial Day, the 27th, we're going to present to you another of the Meet the Founders series, and this one is going to be part 1 of Larry's research on the next founder, Thomas Jefferson. And this will be a bit longer, but he does a real good job. And like I said, it's part 1. We've also then eventually we'll get to part 2 and part 3. So, and I think we'll find this with some of the founders, especially the ones that were well known and had a lot of material written about them, like George Washington or James Madison. So, but then again, there are going to be founders that very little was written about. So, anyway, that's what we're going to present to everyone on May 27th in lieu of a normal roundtable broadcast. Okay. Now, then the next regular weekly broadcast, like the one we're doing tonight, will be on June 3rd. And on June 3rd, we're going to have, if all goes as well as planned, we're going to have an update on election integrity from our panel, Ryan Free and Susie Barnhart. They are going to come back and kind of give us an update on the election integrity issue. I've already asked if there were any issues resulting from the primary in Indiana, and they're telling me that there aren't. So
good news.
Yeah, that's good news, I guess. Yes. And we're also going to have a book review. Now this book review was something that we had originally planned to have on this broadcast tonight, but the author, Charlie Myers, had a death in the family and could not be with us tonight. So we're going to make this part of our program on June 3rd, and that is where our one of our volunteers, Gary Harbaugh, is going to interview Charlie. Charlie has written a book. Charlie is an author. The Devil and the Black Box. So that ought to be very, very interesting. I think it has to do with like the movie industry. Am I right?
I believe that's where he gets most of his thrust of information into is, looks into the movie industry and yeah. So
Doesn't he does movie reviews is kind of a thing that he does on
reviews. He's got a regular podcast which deals with movie reviews. So he's got a tap into that industry and certainly should be an interesting, not only a good interesting book to read, but to hear Gary interview him after reading the book. I'm looking forward to that.
Me too. I don't know. I don't know what to expect, quite honestly. But
and I'll tell you, we'll because we didn't have time really to change it. The play card that we used to introduce tonight's program will have to be used again because that's really where the title came from. The devil is in the details.
That's true. I'm glad you mentioned that. That is true.
We'll get details on when we get Charlie on.
So this means you're off the hook now as far as developing a.
I'm going to go on vacation, Dale. Yeah.
Every week, Ken has to create those thumbnails for us. So, you'll get a week off.
Dale keeps me good and busy with those.
That's right.
It's good.
Okay. All right. Well, I do want to mention that our podcast, which is COS Indiana Live Voices, we have 2 that have recently been published, and you can find these on Spotify.com. But episode number 12 with Christy Stutzman and episode 13 with Victoria Mooring. Those are the last 2. And just for your information, tomorrow not tomorrow, but Wednesday, I'm going to be recording episode number 14, and that's going to be on our own Debbie Stewart.
Another good one.
So we're going to get to know Debbie up close and personal a little bit more. And like I said, I'll be recording that Wednesday, and that'll be episode number 14. So coming up, COS Indiana Live Voices. Also want to mention if anyone has a question or comment that they want to submit after our broadcast or for any other reason, you can contact us at raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. That's raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. Well, Ken, I think that is a wrap for us tonight. So any comments or questions from viewers tonight that we need to address?
We had one that talked about, obviously, David Nally had I'll bring his comment up because it had to do with Dale's ham operator presentation, and he just said sounds like a great recruiting opportunity. So
that's true.
Yeah, anytime we can recruit some more people and get them involved and help our communities at the same time, I think it's a perfect analogy and a perfect marriage of ham operating radio and volunteers.
That's right. Good point. All right. Well, folks, that is a wrap for Ken and I tonight. And we're going to close out like we normally do with our favorite Mark Meckler video. So thank you for joining us this evening. And keep in mind that next Monday, normally our roundtable, we will be off due to Memorial Day, but we'll have a pre-recorded program for you that evening. And the main part of that program is going to be another Meet the Founders series, and that'll be part 1 of Thomas Jefferson. So, Ken, have a good evening.
Good evening and happy Memorial Day to all those.
Thank you. Everyone, have a happy and safe Memorial Day.
Very true. Take care.
I struggle to empathize with people who would give up. It doesn't make sense to me. Sam Adams said For those of you who prefer safety and security over liberty, over the animating fight for liberty, I hope that you enjoy licking the hands that feed you. May your chains rest lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you are our countrymen. Like, do you understand that your kids and you are sentencing your kids and your grandkids and your friends' kids and your neighbors' kids to a lifetime of slavery and servitude, literally, of fear, of living in the darkness, but never, ever, never, never, never give up. George Washington lost the majority of his battles that he fought in the American Revolution. If you read his writings, if you read the letters where he was writing to Congress asking for money and troops, he was saying, we're losing. I don't have the troops I need. I don't have the supplies I need. Did he quit? What about the guys on the beach at Normandy? Like, what did they do? Did they just quit? Oh, there's, a lot of guys are dying around me. It's really bad. It looks really dismal. Those cliffs are huge. Machine gun fire raining down on us. And it's too hard. We should just quit. Thank God those people didn't quit. If they had, where would we be? I get discouraged, for sure. And I will quit fighting at some point. And that point is when the first shovel of dirt hits the top of my box 6 feet down.